So welcome everyone. As you have seen in the messages that I've copied several times in the chat, if you would like a certificate and if you are a member of the USFQ community, you must register to the Google form so that we have your details and we're able to send you the test for those who want a certificate with a test. I will be also in charge of doing mute to people who are with their phones on. So please do your best to keep your phones, your microphones off, keeping in mind that we have over 50 people connected at the moment. Without further ado, I think it's best that we start. Congratulations to all of you who are here at 7 p.m. on the Friday before the holiday. I think it shows tenacity and willingness to learn truly about how to conduct systematic reviews. If you think this is going to be a walk in the park, I am sorry to disappoint you. This is going to be a pretty intense 90 minutes ahead of you. Nevertheless, I'm going to provide you a bit of an introduction, and you will see that even if you have a hard time focusing, it's okay, no worries there. But I will tell you a little bit more about this. Before we start, there may be some of you who do not know who I am. My name is Jonathan. You can call me Jonathan, that's okay. And I'm a professor of gerontology at the School of Medicine of Universidad San Francisco de Quito. And as of this semester, I am also the director of ISIN, Instituto en Salud y Nutrición. This course tonight is provided in English, not because I'm lazy to give it in Spanish, but mainly because usually writing a systematic review requires of you to be able to handle the language of Shakespeare, and for that reason I thought this was a way for you to practice. For you to have a quick idea of what ISIN is, it is not a new institute. Actually, it's among the first institutes that were created in the early 1990s at the university. And it has three main goals. Of course, the first one is to conduct research, including student-led research. I will come back to this in a moment, but also community outreach and knowledge diffusion. And obviously, as you may have guessed, knowledge diffusion is the category within which we are falling right now tonight, discussing how to conduct systematic literature review. This is our last session. This is the third time that I'm presenting this year. Not a workshop, I don't think it's the appropriate word, more of a crash course on systematic literature review. And this is generally the structure that we are going to follow. First, we are going to review how to use this training. I think it was important to start tonight by telling you maybe on some tricks, some tips on how to be using this workshop, this training that I will be providing you with tonight, so that you can keep using it in the weeks, months, and even possibly years to come. After that, we'll have two sections of introduction, which will be the context of systematic literature review, when are they usually conducted, and what systematic literature reviews are. I will not spend a lot of time because this is a methodological crash course. If you are still unclear what they are, you're always welcome to review a bit. The Wikipedia page is not bad at all, but here it will be mainly a practical how-to hands-on methodological course. So point 4 obviously is the one we're going to spend the most time on tonight, which is how to conduct a systematic literature review, and we'll conclude with some opening and limitations conversations. I am happy to stay some 30 minutes at the end of the 90 minutes to answer more specific questions. So feel free to stay until the end if you are currently, for example, conducting your own systematic reviews and you have some burning questions. I will be happy to handle them at the end. And I will also put my contact details at the end of this workshop, which means If you have burning questions afterwards, you're also welcome to get in touch with me. I'll be happy to provide answers more specifically fitted to your expectations and needs. Now, how to use this training. And more specifically, I was thinking how to pay attention to this. This is going to be extremely intense. You are not going to be able to pay attention, I think, the whole way through the 19 minutes. And that's okay. First, this is being recorded. So you will be able to go back to it, and I will give you a bit of a more specific elements about this. I'm here. What you will not be able to do is basically, this will not make you an expert. You cannot expect to become an expert at conducting systematic reviews like this, 90 minutes. It takes time, it takes practice, but it can be a good place to start to listen to this training. I think, not necessarily to start, if you are already on your way, I think there are a number of tips that I will provide tonight that will be helping you to stay on track. I think it's generally the idea. You will see in a moment that there are some additional benefits, just not by listening to this workshop, to this class, but also some practical benefits that I will tell you in a moment. And I finish this here about saying that this is just the beginning. And indeed, I'm giving this course for people who would like to step in to the world of systematic reviews. And if you are curious about knowing about systematic reviews for the sake of it, you may find it quite painful to watch this course because it's a hands-on practical course. Now, in terms of structure, how it will work. As I mentioned, it's a 90 minutes plus question, and it will be intense. I will make the video available to all of you who are registered. My email is already ready to go for the course once it ends. And the aim is to provide you with a general understanding of systematic reviews with a lot of tools associated. A couple of points about do's and don'ts. Here right now, there are 60 of you connected. So please keep your questions for the end, unless there are some terms that I'm using that are unclear. If, for example, there is something unclear that I'm explaining, you're welcome to raise your little blue hand, your Zoom blue hand, to say, Jonathan, say again, unclear. But if you have questions about your own project, please keep them for the end. I'll be grateful. And three don'ts here. It's about conducting research. Research sometimes is perceived as an easy way to go, but it's not. It's usually a long-lasting learning process. Nevertheless, I want to start by saying don't be scared or discouraged by what you're going to hear tonight. I'm providing you a lot of information, but it doesn't mean you need to digest it all tonight. So certainly don't feel like you cannot. When I started systematic reviews, there were 100 voices in my head that told me, what the hell are you putting yourself into? Just run out of this job. But I stuck with it, and a few years later, here I am explaining how to conduct them. So I ended up finding a true value, even to some extent, a certain beauty to systematic literature reviews that I hope you will perceive to some extent through this workshop tonight. And nevertheless, even if you are not too scared, I want to say don't believe it is quick or easy. It is neither of these two. It requires perseverance, it requires efforts, but it also helps not to be completely alone. And in this context, I want to mention a few words about the collaboration we are starting with AEM, the Asociación de Estudiantes de Medicina, whereby we're trying to establish a system for students to lead their own research with the collaboration of AEM in the sense of managerial collaboration, support on an everyday basis, but also the intervention of mentors, including the alumni of the health research group, so the group working for student-led research, and also some professors, mainly me in that context, to provide some specific guidelines whenever that is required. And here we start with systematic literature reviews, but it could be in any other areas. I'm not going to say too much right now because I know there are quite a few members here who are not USFQ, and therefore I will not bother too much. But get in touch with IM if you have questions, if you have doubts, if you have interests in conducting research, do not hesitate. Okay, now, okay, I've just actually mentioned a few points that I wanted here on this slide. Regardless if you want or don't want to work with this team, there are some advantages, some perks into getting this training together tonight. And mainly, I will provide you with some key templates that may be quite helpful for you to practice the work of systematic reviews. By experience, I have learned that the absence of templates is sometimes quite painful. So I'm helping you, I'm pushing you on the road, and I will be providing you with a number of templates. So first, I will provide you, hopefully tonight, but maybe tomorrow morning, because sometimes Zoom takes time to make the video available, but I will download the video and then put it on YouTube because Zoom deletes the video after a while. So as I don't want this to happen, it will take a few hours, but I will make the video available on YouTube. And then about various templates, I will provide you with a template for a study protocol, the template for the Prisma diagram, the template for the screening and extraction file, how to export your results from Zotero to Excel, and finally, and this will be part of this presentation, a manuscript structure. If you have no idea what I just talked about, that's okay. We're going to get back to these in a moment, providing you detail about defining each of those terms as much as possible. Now, let's move on and let's get into the core introduction of this class. And the world of systematic literature review really starts in the field of healthcare, and more specifically in the field of interventions in healthcare. Typically, drugs and vaccines, for example, are why systematic literature review started, to be able to have an overview, an exhaustive overview. I'll come back to the word exhaustive in a moment, an exhaustive overview of what the evidence that is currently available is about, okay? And here I've used a definition of evidence-based. So I've reused a definition of evidence-based medicine because that's where it started, but really it applies to any field. That's why I replaced medicine with a small x so that you can put your field if you feel that it's more adequate to you. So it goes, evidence-based medicine, or EKIS, is an approach to medical practice intended to optimize decision-making by emphasizing the use of evidence from well-designed and well-conducted research. And it means that evidence is the core, is the starting point of conducting research. Conducting research is not something you do alone and by yourself and pretending that nothing else has been done before. I was looking for a picture of walking on the shoulder of giants because in a way, conducting research is building based on everything that's been done before us. And within this context, systematic literature reviews hold currently in our world of evidence, they hold a very specific place. Probably, or maybe, possibly not, you have heard of the pyramid of evidence, which helps us understand one thing. And that's quite important. It is that not all evidence are born equal. Otherwise said, there are some proofs, some evidence that have more value than others. And not just because someone speaks it louder, does that make a study or evidence more true or more valuable. The point here is that we are surrounded with evidence of some forms, but they are ranked according to a very specific order. I did not put all the rankings there because they depend quite a lot on your particular field. If you belong to the field of medicine, just look up at the evidence, the pyramid of evidence for medicine, and you will see the ranking, but each author somewhat has a different order. But there is usually one consensus in there, is that systematic reviews and meta-analysis belong to the very top. It means if you want to say something is true, and you are citing a systematic review that supports this fact that is true, then this is the best possible proof that it is true. However, if you say something is true and you are using an opinion to support this fact, then it's a rather weak level of evidence. I'm not saying they're useless. I'm saying they are not as valuable as others, but they are nevertheless valuable if nothing above has yet been published. I'm not going to go into a great amount of details, but in the time of troubles the way we are right now in COVID, the idea of the pyramid of evidence is key for internal debates that we are having. When someone says drug X works for COVID, you need to ask what is the evidence and where is that evidence position on the pyramid that will help you establish whether or not you should put a lot of trust and value in this evidence. Now, let's define, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because I would like to move on and try as much as possible to stick to our 90 minutes, but this is a definition of a systematic literature review, one provided by the Cochrane Library, probably the mecca of systematic reviews. This is probably the biggest systematic literature reviews library in the world. If you do not know what the Cochrane Library is and you're interested in systematic reviews, I strongly urge you to jump on the website at some point to have a look. It's a marvelous source of information. So here goes the definition. A systematic review attempts to identify, appraise, and synthesize all, I put all in italic for a particular reason I'm going to mention in a moment, all the empirical evidence that meets pre-specified eligibility criteria to answer a specific research question. It may seem like a short, simple, and straightforward definition. To some extent it is, but it also has tremendous amount of implications, and that's why we could spend a whole full course semester on this, but we only have 90 minutes. Out of this definition, I like to take out three keywords that if you remember, if you memorize them, they will help you to make sure that you don't forget a certain aspect of what a systematic review is. And those three words are, as on the board, replicable, exhaustive, and critical. I put them in this particular order because they make the acronym REC, which is usually the word for memory when you're watching a recorded video, for example. So it's a good mnemotechnic strategy, REC. Replicable, exhaustive, and critical. Replicable has a very particular meaning. Replicable means if another researcher has your research methods for your systematic review, not only they will be able to redo your research, but they will be able to find the same results. It's somehow a bit like a recipe. It means the recipe is so detailed that if someone bakes the same cake, it will look exactly the same, it will taste exactly the same, and it will be in all possible way identical. For any of you who are fans of cooking, you will know that usually cooking recipes are not detailed enough because every time a different person makes it, it tastes completely different, which suggests there is an amount of unknown as part of these recipes. So that was the first word, replicable, and it's a very powerful word. And the other very powerful word is exhaustive. It's not a little bit of literature, it's not a lot of literature, it's all. Every single piece of evidence that responds to your research question should be included in your report. Sorry, do you think I could have a volunteer in the room to be a co-host with me in case there are people who leave their microphone on? Can someone raise their hand? Okay, Kevin, I will put you right now as co-host so that you can help me put the microphones down as soon as they come up. Thank you very much, okay, Kevin. All right. So exhaustive means every single piece of evidence that is published and available should be included in your report. That's why I put the word all in italic. It may seem like a small word, but again, that word is essential, is key for you to be able to respond to the definition of a systematic literature review. And then finally, it's a word that we often forget, but we cannot forget. It's the word critical. It means it's not because something is published that it's good. There is a lot of shit published out there. And just because someone managed to publish it, it does not mean that it's good. So critical means it's published, yes, but you need to have criteria, a number of criteria to be able to judge the quality of a publication. And that way, it will be included in your report, but there will be a number of warnings saying, I have found proof that this study may not be as reliable as one could say. So anyway, with this, we are ending our introduction. I hope I haven't killed your motivation by now, because now I just warn you, the hardcore part starts. And basically, the process is 11 steps. 11 steps, every author, every speaker presenting systematic reviews would provide a different number of steps, but I choose 11 because to me, it seems the most reliable way to work step by step. And it's a very much of a process, step by step. Just like recipes, cooking recipes have a step by step, here you very much need that step by step. So here it goes. If you are not too sure what they mean, it's okay, because afterwards, every slide will focus on one step after another. So we start, maybe it's not so obvious, but you must start with having a research question established. Then you must translate this research question into a search strategy. You know what you search, now how do you search it? And then once you've completed your search, you need to be able to define criteria to establish the eligibility of the evidence that you want to include in your review. Then you need to complete this search by conducting hand searches, as opposed to automatic searches that are conducted prior to that. And then the following two bubbles here are related to reviewing the evidence. How do you review the citations that you have identified? First, into a screening, which means titles and abstracts, and then a full text review, reviewing the full PDF of the publication. For both of them, I put 1 and 2, because as part of a standard process, you must review those evidence twice by 2 independent reviewers to avoid a bias. Followed at this point in time, you have found every single piece of evidence that you want to include in your review, and you're ready to conduct the data extraction, followed by the critical appraisal. And then we move on to the synthesis phase, which has to do with analysis, writing, and publications. And happily, you reach the ta-da phase, which means you are done. I mean ta-da in a slightly ironic way, because it may take quite a bit of time to reach that point. Okay, now, before we move on to each of those steps, I want to start with how to develop a research question. If you are not clear about this part, this is not going to solve everything, but at least it's a place to start. And here I have 4 key elements that I think you should keep in mind when you are working on a research question. Often I have students coming to me saying, Jonathan, I don't know what to research. Or Jonathan, I have an amazing idea for research. And then when we start looking into it, it's like, maybe it's not that amazing. Of course, there are many students who come up with a perfect question from the beginning. I'm not saying anything else. So the first point is the rationale. That is, what is the purpose of this research? Usually, sometimes we hear people saying, I do research for the sake of research, for the pleasure of it, but it is rarely the unique reason for conducting research. The purpose is quite important. The relevance also matters. So what? It means once I have the answer, what does it matter? What is the impact? What is the consequences that this finding may have? And usually you have to find an answer for all these elements. The part of feasibility sometimes is one that with little experience in research we tend to ignore, but you need to ask yourself, what is the level of resources that are available for you to conduct this research? If you want to conduct a systematic literature review that includes 30,000 citations, you can. Actually, I'm conducting one at the moment. It's a bit crazy, but you can. But you need to make sure, you need to ask yourself, do I have the resources available to conduct it? Do I have the help? Do I have the time? Do I have all that is required, as you will see before? And finally, the part of innovation, you need to ask yourself, has it been done before? And this is a key part of evidence-based medicine or evidence-based whatever. You need to ask yourself, has this been done before? I will say it over and over during this presentation, but you are not here to reinvent the wheel or reinventar el agua tibia, as Ecuadorians say. You are not here to repeat work unless it's a particular objective to replicate a former study. But if you have no idea the study has been done before, then maybe you need to go back to reading a little bit to make sure you are not replicating existing evidence. Now, these were rationale, relevance, feasibility, and innovation, the three key elements to make sure your research question is on the right track. And here, afterwards, I would like to mention that they are supporting frameworks to help you phrase a research question. If you are in the field of healthcare, and if you are looking more specifically at interventional healthcare, then the following example may be quite among the best frameworks that exist, but look around at other systematic literature reviews to look for other frameworks specific to your field or interest. And the example that I'm providing you right now sometimes can be used in other areas if it's adapted a little bit. It is called the PICOS framework. It's the acronym for populations, interventions, comparators, outcomes, and study types. I will provide you the example afterwards on how to use this framework. It usually pushes you to think about some parts of your research question that you may not have thought about. Before we go any further, I would like to know, am I speaking too fast? Are there people in the room who have a hard time understanding and following me? In which case, do you wish that I go a tiny bit slower? Can you raise your hand if I'm speaking too fast? All right, I see no hands raised, which I will assume it is clear enough, or I've already lost you completely, which is another possibility. You will see that sometimes I will skip some parts of the text here because I will assume you can read on your own and get back to some of the elements with the video. Maybe it's something that I haven't said, but I think if you are interested truly in conducting a systematic review, I recommend that you save that video of this course sometimes, and then you get back to listening to it at several moments of your work, because I'm sure you will understand some things that I say in a different way, depending on your level of experience. I'm not saying that this presentation is the Bible, far from it, but I have now quite a bit of experience in this area, and not all I say is completely out of place. Okay, so here is the example of the PICOS framework so adapted to this particular question. It's just an example. If you don't know what these words mean, it's fine. It doesn't matter at this point in time. The question is, what is the efficacy and safety of ECT, which stands for electroconvulsive therapy, in pregnant women with depression? Okay, and here goes how the PICOS framework works. P stands for populations, and in that case, we're talking about depressed pregnant women. The I for intervention, clearly here, is ECT as electroconvulsive therapy. C stands for comparator. That is to say, what is ECT compared to? And in that case, it's not none, it's any. Any study that compares an ECT, any study that compares ECT to anything would be relevant to our research question. O, outcome, stands for here efficacy and safety, because that's what the outcomes that we are interested in at this point in time. For study type, here I'm making a bit of a leap of faith somehow. I assume we're looking for randomized controlled trials, but arguably it could be different. But usually in the field of healthcare, randomized controlled trials are the standard of a way to prove a fact. So here it would be a systematic literature review, including randomized controlled trial. I hope it's clear. Sometimes the study types are a bit unclear. We are conducting a systematic review about randomized controlled trials. Okay, so here at this point in time, we're going to assume that our research question, tick, we can move on. We have our research question. And then we must move on to the search strategy. That's what we are going to start talking about right now. And really, a search strategy is two questions: where and what. And here I'm going to make a whole metaphor, a whole comparison that you may find completely strange, but I hope will be helpful. So a search strategy is just like any search, even if it has nothing to do with academic research. And here, let's say that a kid has been lost in the forest, right? A kid is lost in the forest. And we are in charge of looking for it. So basically, we are developing a search strategy. And we must answer first two questions. Where are we searching? That is more or less where is the area where the kid could be, possibly. Where? And second, what? We need a description of the kid, as otherwise we will never find the kid. I don't know if you heard the story of that search party where they were looking for a lost woman. They were looking for days until a few days later they realized that they were searching for actually a member of the search party, and they didn't realize. So there was one person in the room who was searching for herself, just because they were not clear enough as to who they were searching for. So where and what are the two key questions that we are asking ourselves when we are developing search strategy. In the context of a systematic review, the where is not a forest. Anyway, so it's not a forest that we are searching in, but it's database. My computer says that the internet is unstable. If at some point it gets cut, you need to interrupt me so that I repeat if there are parts that are unclear. So the first part is where do we search? And that is to say, which databases will we include? And you need to ask yourself, are those databases relevant locations? For example, if you are looking for recipes and you are searching cooking recipes and you are searching into Medline, you are up for disappointment because Medline does not have cooking recipes. So you need to ask yourself, are the studies that I'm looking for likely to be in the database that I'm including? And also, are these locations likely to host all publications in the area? Let me go back to the lost kid. Now, let's assume we haven't lost one child, but we have lost 5. And we have to define the perimeter of the search. And we say, this forest. And the question is it likely that we'll find a kid in that forest? And let's say that it's yes. And the second question, is it likely that all 5 kids are in that forest? If the answer is no, then you need to include more than one forest. And just because it's likely that you find one kid in the forest doesn't mean it's enough. So you need to make sure your database selection is exhaustive, is complete enough that you will be having a satisfactory level of exhaustiveness. Databases are just boxes virtual boxes with a number of papers inside. We could say they are not databases, they are libraries, just like a physical library, except usually when we conduct systematic review, they are virtual libraries. And just like in a library, just by entering in the library, you don't find the paper necessarily that you want. You need to have to know how to search inside this library. And for those of you who were born, I think, in the 70s or before and entered a library, there was this little notebooks system to find a book in the library. Whereas now we have computers and they have search engines for us to be able to find papers. So you need to find the search engines to search these databases. And the question is, can they be accessed free of charge? And do they cover all selected databases? As I assume, most of you are belonging to the field of healthcare. And the standard or the most classical database is Medline. If you have never heard of Medline, it's basically a library of published research. And Medline is not as such a searchable database. It needs a search engine. But Medline was developed in parallel to its search engine, and it's called PubMed. Okay, PubMed searches Medline. But sometimes one single search engine will look for several databases. For example, Ovid, I think it's called Ovid, O-V-I-D, not COVID, Ovid, searches multiple databases. Search engines like Google Scholar are indeed search engines. However, they are not connected to a specific database. So you need to be a bit careful here because you need to be clear and understand what you are searching. I will come back to Google Scholar a bit later. And then once you know where you're going to search, you need to know what you are going to search. And typically here you need to develop search terms. 1, 2, 3 says here. That's because the next 3 slides are about 1, 2, 3. So let's jump into the next points. Is there anything unclear that I've said so far and you need clarification? All right, let's move on. Then let's...
Jonathan, can you hear me? It's Jorge.
Hello, Jorge. Yes, shoot your question.
Yes, I have a question. Can you please clarify what is the meaning of mesh term? Because I think that's important when we consider searching on engines, and probably that's a concept that sometimes is not really clear.
I'm opening PubMed at the moment. When we reach the point of number 3, I will get back to this. I did not include this as the standard process of this presentation, but I can spend a few seconds on this. Let me just make sure I have it ready because my internet sometimes not so fast. Okay, I'll do my best to show you in a second. Okay, I'll get back to this in a moment. And if I don't answer your question, Jorge, please let me know by 8:30 so that I will provide a quick overview of what mesh terms are.
Thank you.
And if you are unclear about what they are, I will provide you this information in a moment. So let's continue. Let's start with the database. So typically, as I mentioned before, Medline, or another one is called Embase, are among the key ones in the field of healthcare. There are others, typically Scopus, and Scopus is much of a broader search database. If you don't know what your databases are in your particular field, look around. Whenever you see this little wheel here, it means don't reinvent the wheel. That's why I put a little wheel. And typically, go to systematic reviews of your field. Look for these systematic reviews to look for their databases that they searched. And this will provide you with a partial answer. But in the field of healthcare, usually Medline and Base. Lately, I've been also including Scopus. You can include several others. This is a good place to start. Always start by looking at other systematic reviews in your field. They will provide you with a ton of answers before you ask yourself what they are, including mesh terms. We'll get back to this a bit later. So this was about choosing your database. Then the question is, how do we search this database? And typically, search engines. And here, and that's why I wanted this methodological crash course to be also practical, is the theory of a systematic review is not so hard to understand. What I find most difficult is the practice of it. And often we are stopped by technical issues. And one of the technical issues is, can you export the results from your search engine? When you're searching stuff on Google, how to cure COVID, and you have 300,000 pages of results, probably all of them wrong, or most of them, depend. Sorry, I'm bothering about Google, it doesn't matter. Google invents tons of answers. The point is, in Google, you cannot export the results. And when you have hundreds of thousands of pages, it's impossible to export the results. So you need to ask yourself when you are starting to use a search engine, am I able to export the results in the format that I need? And in that particular issue, Google Scholar is not your best friend. Google Scholar, to the best of my knowledge, maybe they've improved recently, but they do not allow you to export the results. If you have only one page of results with 25 entries, you can just copy paste into a Word file. But if you have 200, 300, 500 pages, then there start the issues. So ask yourself, is it exportable? Then you need to ask yourself, how many times am I searching the same databases? Because, for example, when you search Medline and Embase, there is some, at least I think, a third of overlap. So you will find a lot of duplicates afterwards, which is not necessarily an issue, but you need to keep in mind that sometimes databases overlap. And also, does the search engine allow me to conduct advanced searches? Jenny has a question. Sorry, I'm going to answer your question just now. Go ahead.
Yes, excuse me, Jonathan. What do you mean by about results to be exported?
You will understand in a bit later. You remember when I showed you this, going here, of screening? Screening means that you are, hold on. Okay, let me go back to the forest and the kids. Let's say that we have one kid lost in the forest, and you know in this square kilometer, the kid probably is. And usually what we do is we send people to look for the forest. But let's say that you have a huge truck that can pick up the forest and put it in a room for you to be able to search it in peace. In there, you will have many trees and few children, in theory. If you have more children than trees, then it's not a forest, or it's too many children that are lost. The point is, you need to have criteria to establish what is a kid, what is a tree. And that is why you need, what question was I answering? I got lost just now. What, can you repeat your question, Jenny? That was...
Yes, I said, what do you mean about exporting results?
Right. So exporting the results is the same thing as picking the forest and putting it in a room. What we're doing is exporting the results and putting it into Excel for us to say whether or not they comply with our eligibility criteria. When we search Embase or PubMed, usually 90 or 95% of the results will be irrelevant, and only between 5 and 10, depending on your research question, 5 and 10 will be relevant, okay? So that's why you need to be clear about this part. Does that help you, Jenny? Is it a bit clearer?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and you will see as we go further down the road, you will understand in a bit more details what I mean here with the screen. So search engine, we need to be able to export them into Excel Sometimes other researchers use other tools than Excel, but Excel is free of charge to almost every single student in the world or people working in a university. That's why I find Excel user-friendly in that regard. It doesn't require you to pay for an additional tool. I will show you in greater detail a bit later. Let's move on then to developing search terms. And, you know, in a way, the mesh terms are secondary to what I'm going to show you right now. Developing your search terms is key. If you do a shitty job, then you are going to do a shitty systematic review. There is no way around it, okay? And it's one of the most complex and decisive steps of a systematic review. And the standard way of preparing a search terms, by the way, when you are typing how to cure COVID in Google, you are writing search terms. That's a fancy word just to say what you are putting in the little bar of Google. The difference is that Google has a very complex algorithm, and the algorithm is pretty smart to identify what you are saying, even if your description is pretty bad. But when we're looking at scientific databases, they are not as smart as Google. And they are stupid on purpose, because who of you in the room understands completely the algorithm behind Google? If anyone says yes, I kind of won't believe them. The point is, it's extremely complex and it's highly non-replicable. And actually, if I search something today, and again, in 5 days, possibly the results will be different, and we don't want that to happen in a systematic review. I'll say more a bit about that later. Now, one way, the standard way of preparing search terms is by using Boolean terms. Boolean terms may sound like a complex word, but it's really 3 very simple words: and, or, not. Now let's go back to our kid who is lost in the forest. But now it's not truly lost in the forest. Let's say that we are looking. I'm going to change the metaphor a little bit here so that you understand a bit better. Keep in mind that we are always looking for studies. We're not looking for kids, we're looking for studies that respond to a particular research question. Let's say that you are sitting in the professor's chair in a classroom and you have 30 kids in front of you. And you want to identify every blonde child who is wearing glasses, right? So the Boolean term here is and, because you want blonde and with glasses. And it's a Boolean term that limits, that restricts the search. Because if you want kids that are blonde and have glasses, it probably talks about a very small portion of the classroom. But if you say you are looking for kids who are blonde or who are wearing glasses, you will include kids that have black hair with glasses and kids that are blonde that are not wearing glasses. Therefore, the Boolean term or expands your search. And the third Boolean term not excludes. However, I put the little radioactive symbol here because not is a very dangerous Boolean term. Let me explain why. Let's say that the kids have provided you with a little description of themselves in papers, and now you have the list of papers in front of you. And you still want blondes who are wearing glasses, so you're reading the descriptions. But let's say now that you want kids that are blonde, but that are not wearing glasses. You say blonde, not glasses. But what if there is a kid who wrote in that description, I am blonde and I am not wearing glasses? The search engine is stupid. It finds the word glasses, therefore it excludes. So you are excluding the kid because the word glasses appears in their description, despite the fact that they are not wearing glasses. Okay, so let's say, to a more specific example in the context of healthcare, let's say that you're looking for studies about HIV, but not conducted in the United States. So you say HIV, not United States. But what if there is a study that said, we did not conduct this study in the United States, just because the word United States appear, it's excluded when really it is relevant to you. So my strong recommendation is the Boolean term not should really not be used. Find a ways to focus on or and and. These are really the ones that can be useful. So let's go back to our example of the efficacy of electroconvulsive therapy in pregnant women with depression. I hope you're following me. I know I'm going fast, but I hope I want to stick to 90 minutes. So the population was depressed pregnant women, but really now that you are starting to express your search strategy, you must use depressed and pregnant women. You don't want pregnant women who are not depressed, and you don't want depressed women who are not pregnant. Okay, I'm not putting "and women" because pregnancy usually is limited to women. So depressed and pregnant would be the two first ands that you need to connect together to express the search strategy for this particular research question. Then the I of intervention is and electroconvulsive therapy, and efficacy or safety and randomized controlled trials. Now, I'm representing here our search strategy. Each circle represents, in a way, the forest that we were talking about. So in this circle, in this forest here, we will find every single study that looks at pregnant women. Okay, every single study about pregnant women is within this circle. And then every single study about depression is within this circle. And there is a whole area. Can you guys see my mouse by any chance or not?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this area here is the area about studies that are about pregnant women and depression. Okay, and then you have electroconvulsive therapy, randomized controlled trials, and efficacy and safety, efficacy or safety. And really what we are looking for is studies that belong to this particular area here that fulfills every single requirement of our research question. And usually you want this area to be the smallest possible while being exhaustive. Because if it's too big, then you will spend a lifetime reviewing evidence. And if it's too small, then you may miss relevant evidence. Okay, this area varies in size. In an average systematic review, this area would represent between 500 and 5,000 papers. This is the average numbers that you would find. Sometimes it can be more, sometimes it could be less, but it's quite unusual. Unless your question is about something so specific with a word that is encountered quite rarely that it will make this area quite smaller. But usually this area is between 500 and 5,000 papers. Here, when I say depressed, we must think of something. Does every single study about depression use the word depressed? Actually, if you work a bit in the area of depression, your answer would likely be yes. Why? Because it's a pretty standard word to talk about depression. In the field of pregnancy, for example, however, there are some alternative words that are not necessarily using the word pregnant women. And this is basically what I wanted to say. So what these are is really they are representing groups of terms. Let me try to explain in a better way. Here. Well, hold on. I'm jumping maybe a little bit too fast here. Right. So let's say you are conducting your study on depression. And here I say as a tip, don't reinvent the wheel. Look at other systematic literature reviews that have looked at depression, because you will be able to find their own search strategy, and maybe you will be able to cite and reuse their own, at least part of their search strategy. Here, let me give you an example. Let's say that you find a systematic literature review that is about the safety of SSRIs in depressed older adults. You could say, This has nothing to do with my own systematic review, but it does because it's about depression. So if you focus on the search terms related to depression, you will be able to find a pretty decent description of the search strategy, even though the literature review is not exactly what you are trying to replicate. Remember, you need to explain every single word using every possible synonym. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the previous slide in a second. Let's focus on line 2 right now. And it says pregnant, expecting, or gravid, which are standardly the 3 main words that refer to a pregnant woman, right? And here, that's what I was trying to explain by group terms. So group term is pregnant women, and thereafter you must express every single word. But maybe this looks weird to you because I haven't moved to my previous slide, so let me explain. Google, the little Google search, is made for, I was going to say stupid people, but no, it's meant for people who are not necessarily educated in the field of academic research. So that's why there is a very complex algorithm to help us search. But in the field of healthcare or the field of research, it's not so simple. So you must learn the language that the search engine uses. Okay, let me give you an example. If you are searching a particular term, let's say HIV, and you only want to search these terms in the titles and abstracts of every single study published in this database, PubMed requires you to use this particular code. Square brackets, TIAB, TI title, AB abstract, right? That's how PubMed understands that you are only searching in these. The standard for PubMed, if you put nothing, it will search anywhere, okay? And sometimes it will result in too many studies. I will get back to this. In a systematic literature review, the standard at the beginning is to search only in titles and abstracts because it helps you have a bit of a more focused search. So before you start using a search engine, you must learn its language. You must try to understand the way it speaks. Otherwise, you will say things, you will think you mean something, but really you're meaning something else. And here, what I'm suggesting is that you always prepare your search terms on Excel, because you will have to do a lot of copy paste going back and forth. And if you have to type them every time, first, it's time consuming, and second, you may make mistakes. So I strongly suggest that you prepare your search terms in Excel. While I'm at it, you know what? Because I was preparing the file earlier today that I was going to share with you. So I'm going to share it with you right now. I'm going to do a new share for a second. So this is what you are seeing right now is the file that I'm going to send you after this workshop. And this is an example of a search strategy that I used for my own doctoral thesis. And as you can see, it can be pretty long sometimes. And the idea is that here you can copy Control-C and Control-V when you are conducting your search, which makes your work far quicker. Okay, so that's what I mean by preparing your search strategy inside inside Excel. Also, when you run your search, you must write the date. Why? Because when you write that your study is replicable, it is replicable at a particular moment in time. If you are searching for papers right now and doing it again in 5 months, there will be new papers that are published. So arguably you could say, well, but it's not replicable. Sure, it is, but if you can put the specific date when you are searching. Okay, there are some limitations here, but I'm not going to enter them just now. You need to track the dates. So here you could say on the document that I was showing you just before, you put the date when you've conducted the search. I see time flying and hope we'll be able to complete the search in the whole thing. So here we have the example. Basically, it's the same copy that I just showed you before, but it's pasted on this particular slide set, where you can see the wording of the search strategy. And here you can see there is a little asterisk here, a little star after depress. And in the particular context of PubMed, it means that after the asterisk, there can be any character. So here it means it includes depression, depressed, depressed, depressing, okay? And TIAB means you're going to find all these words in titles and abstracts. Here I put, I don't know how accurate that was, I just put it randomly, but here as an alternative for the word depression, I put, for example, suicide with D, little star, which means it includes suicidal, suicides, and any other adjective that may be associated with this. But it means you must quite well understand how your search engine works. So you must read. Usually on the search engine, there will be a little part that says how to use this search engine. You should read it before you start using it. Otherwise, you will make mistakes. So here you see depressed pregnant women on line 3. It says number 1 and number 2. So number 1 and number 2, it combines both. And it's as if there were parentheses. I'm not going to enter a lot of details. You will need to learn on your own in that regard. And then it goes on. Here, it's a small detail, but that's also why it's so important to understand the language of your search engine. You see here, there are little quotes. PubMed, if you put TIAB afterwards, will only search for the last word. So if you are putting 2 words, for example, HIV prevention, and you put TIAB, it will only search the word prevention. But you need to put quotes, HIV prevention, to search both. But keep in mind, they will have to be written exactly like this and in this particular order next to each other. All the consequence that has in terms of exhaustiveness of what you are searching. Also here you need to be careful. You may want to include British English as well as American English. For example, the words often there's S and Z that are different in both languages. You need to include both if you want to search for both use of language. I hope you are following me still here. So this is an example, a page of what it looks like on PubMed when you are conducting the advanced search. And you can see here, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, until 11, with a number of items that are associated with each circle, really, as I was mentioned earlier. This was a better search strategy. As you can see, for pregnancy, there were quite a lot of other words. Pregnant, gestate, gravid, obstetrics, conception, antenatal, blah, 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 and goes on to be as exhaustive as possible in terms of how to define what a pregnant woman can be defined as in literature. Hope I haven't killed you so far, and if I have, I am sorry. This is what it looks like on Scopus. Scopus is a quite different search engine to use. A bit tricky sometimes, but again, you should read carefully how to use Scopus to make sure you're searching correctly. There is nothing worse than finishing your systematic review and realizing you made an error in your search strategy, which means you must start all over again. I speak of this as experience. Okay, so we have completed the search strategy, which arguably is among the most challenging elements of conducting a systematic review. And now we move on to establishing the eligibility criteria, the glasses and the blonde hair, for those who are still following on the metaphor. So let's continue. Now what we are, in theory, we have thousands of papers. And now as part of the screening process, we must remove those that are not relevant, right? Remember, we are here in the circles, and now we must remove the 90% of the studies that are irrelevant. But for that, and for your study to be replicable, sorry, you must have clear criteria, eligibility criteria, okay? And this process is an exclusion process, so you must develop exclusion criteria. They need to be explicit and objective. For example, if you are selecting people in a room and you say, I'm only including pretty people, well, your definition of pretty people may be quite different from the person next to you, which means it is not a replicable process of selection of people. Sorry for that bad comparison. And those criteria must be absolutely aligned with your research question. Just because you think, oh, maybe it would be interesting to include also this type of studies, does it answer your research question? Yes or no? If the answer is no, then change your criteria. Also here, a small trick is to develop criteria in a logical order so that, I'm going to show you in a second here with this example. I'm going to explain with this particular example. So this is what eligibility criteria look like once they are inside your protocol. And they're numbered, as you can see. There is categories 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on your research question. There can be more. And as you can see, they usually, not always, but often they follow the same PICOS framework. You can recognize it a bit. So here, remember, it's an exclusion process. I'm going to have to cover this quite quickly, although it would deserve quite a bit more time to be focused on. But here, let's focus on the study population for a second. And here we're looking for pregnant women who are depressed. And here we have 21, a criterion that says not human. And typically, although in the context of depression, it's quite unlikely, but there are many studies that are not about humans, whether they're animals or in vitro studies, which means they are quite easy to identify, and we are certain they will never be relevant to our research question. Therefore, we can use the criterion not human to exclude rapidly all the studies that are not about human beings. And then here, arguably, you could separate 22 and 23 into two different ones, not pregnant women and not pregnant women with depression during pregnancy. I'm not going to go again in great details here. But basically, you need to go through each step one by one after the other. For example, I'm going to take the example of 02. Is a study a duplicate, yes or no? Does it mean, it means, have I already seen this study in my database? In which case, if it's a duplicate, you can exclude it using criterion 02. If it's a study that is not a duplicate, blah, 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 you move on, but it's not about humans, then you can exclude it using 21. But you use your criteria in one after the other. You must tick every box before you move on to the next, so that at the end you reach 51 and 61, which are the two categories where you do not exclude. These are the studies that remain at the end of your screening process, right? So this is an example of eligibility criteria. I'm sorry this is so fast, but I think it's quite necessary. Let's continue to hand searches, and here you would need to read more to be clear about them. But basically, we must assume that our search using databases is incomplete. We must accept that most likely our search is not exhaustive. And for that reason, we usually accept to have to search in some specific places. Typically, the WHO website includes reports that are not available on PubMed. So you may want to include the WHO website, but again, you need to make sure you are including the proper resources that are not included in your databases and also are likely to include some information that are relevant to you. So now let's move on to the screening phase. The screening basically is the review of citations, right? So now you have an Excel file with hundreds or thousands of papers of citations. Each paper is one row of your screening file, right? Now you must check the titles and abstracts of every single line, not only once, but twice, as I mentioned before. Twice because you want to avoid bias. So two different people will check the same paper and make the decision on whether or not they should be included. And your job is to afterwards discuss and to make sure both reviewers agree. That's why it's often nearly impossible to conduct a systematic review alone. Okay. So you have a screening file on Excel. Remember, I will send you the template for your screening file. It may look simple, the process of creating your search, your screening file, but it's not that simple. You need to be quite careful to make sure you're not making a mess. I'm not going to go into great detail here because there is a little how-to file that I will be sending you in the email. And again, if you are not clear, Google it. There are many other people who ask themselves the question for you. Google is your best friend in that particular case. Okay. I'm going to have to cover this. You will have to learn about this on your own, about deduplication and using softwares like Zotero or EndNote. I recommend Zotero because it is free of charge. Zotero, like EndNote, are reference manager softwares, and they are absolutely necessary for the conduct of a systematic literature review. Let me show you what a screening file looks like so that you are maybe a bit clearer about what I'm talking about. So this is an example of what a screening file looks like. Okay, each line is one study. This is another example. This has nothing to do with pregnant women and depression. Here you have the title, the authors, the year, journal, volume, issue, page. And then here you have screening and QC. QC stands for quality check, but really it's screening 1, screening 2, doesn't matter. And here you can see some examples of the criteria that we are not seeing the list of criteria. It's on another page of the Excel file, but you can see them here. And you can see the 2 reviewers that took part of this in the screening. And here, if you're paying a tiny bit of attention, you can see they usually agreed. 21, 21, 21, 21, 10, 10, 20, 20, except on the last one where they disagreed, 10, 20. Both reviewers discussed and concluded that 20 was the correct exclusion criterion. It means that on this particular extract, not a single study was kept. They were all excluded. They were all irrelevant to the research question. I hope you are still with me on this. Here, this is about little tricks to go a little faster, so I will not cover them right now, but I strongly encourage you to go back to them once you are ready to get into that step. So we've conducted the screening now. The hundreds of citations have been reviewed, and we have now a subset of our citations that we still haven't excluded. And at this point in time, we only reviewed parentheses. I forgot to mention one thing. In theory here, there should be next to the title, the abstract of the study. I did not include it here because it took too much space on the little PowerPoint slide. But in your screening file, you always have the abstract. It's a necessary part to be able to make a decision. Otherwise, just based on the title, it's not enough for you to make a decision. So afterwards, you need to do a full text review of the papers that remained at the end of the screening, okay? So you are left with non-excluded citations. Basically, you are now reviewing the full PDF of the paper. And the rest here are details that I will recommend you to read later. But you are reviewing the paper in full, applying the same criteria of exclusion. And by the end of this process, conducted by 2 independent people, you will have your final list of included studies in your systematic review. That's why I say here, congrats, you have your final list of citations. So now you are ready to prepare the PRISMA diagram, which stands for Preferred Reporting Items for Systematic Reviews and Meta-Analysis. It's a very complex word to say. Basically, you have a little picture explaining what you did and how many papers you excluded at each level. And this is one example here. In this particular systematic review, they included 3 databases to be searched, Medline, Scopus, and Web of Science, each of them with a different number of citations that were included. After automatic removal of duplicates conducted by Zotero or EndNote, you have 1,500 results. And at the level of screening, they removed nearly 90% of the studies. And as you move on down the road, by the end, they included only 14 studies from 1,500. And 1 studies that were included at the beginning. Hope you're still with me here. So at this point in time, you have your final list of studies and you're ready to move on to the data extraction. And here I'm going to start to have to go a bit quicker if I want to stick to the time. To be brief, the data extraction means you are taking out of the PDFs all the information that is relevant to your research question. Basically, you are copy-pasting information into an Excel file. The purpose is that for you not to have to go back to the PDF later on as you conduct the analysis, all of the relevant data will be in a single file. This is time consuming, this is long, but it is a very fundamental part of conducting a systematic review. Really, the data extraction sheet is the true result of a systematic review. All the data is there. And here you are not allowed to do one thing. You are not allowed to modify the data that is presented in the publication. You have to copy it exactly as it is in the publication. You are not allowed to interpret any of the data that is presented in the studies that you're including. If the data is absent, for example, you have one column that says what country was the study conducted in, and the report, the publication just doesn't say. Don't leave the cell blank, put an R for not reported, so that you know you searched, but you didn't find this information. Again, do not interpret the data. I will show you here an example of an extraction file. I will not provide you with a template because every single extraction file is different depending on your research question. Although arguably there are some standard part, authors, title, type of study, publication year, and so on, but you will be in charge of building your own extraction file. This example here is a very specific one because it was one for a meta-analysis, so it means it had to be a lot more specific and a lot more detailed. And 2, it was about clinical trials. But nevertheless, it will provide you with a bit of an idea of what it means to extract the data. Here, each line is not a study, each line is an arm of a clinical trial. One line is one treatment of the clinical trial. And in this particular treatment, in this particular clinical trial by Ardeshna, published in 2014, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 arms in the clinical trial. And here you can see what type of arms there were. Rituximab induction, rituximab maintenance, watchful waiting, meaning nothing. And here there were a second watchful wait. I don't remember why that was, but anyway, there were 5 arms in the treatment of the clinical trials, and you can see how many patients were in each of the clinical trials. So basically, you need to do that for every single study that you are including in your systematic review so that you have every single piece of relevant data on your extraction file. And at that point in time, you're ready to move on to the critical appraisal phase. As I said before, just because it's published, it doesn't mean it's good. So you need to find ways to evaluate the quality of the studies that you are including. And for that, you may or may not be able to use standardized quality assessment tools. For example, when you are including only clinical trials, there are many tools that are available for you to use. If you just search on Google quality assessment for clinical trials, you will have pages and pages of results. But if you are looking, for example, if you belong to the field of architecture, you may struggle a bit more to find relevant quality assessment tools. Just to give you an idea of what it means to assess the quality in the context of a clinical trial, one standard question is, were the people put randomly in each of the groups? And if the answer is no, then usually it's a very bad point for the clinical trial. I say usually because there are some specific contexts in which it's not the case, but if it's not been randomized, usually it's pretty bad for the clinical trial. If it was not blinded, meaning the doctors who were running the clinical trials knew who was receiving what treatment, usually it's a very, very bad point for the clinical trial. So all of these will allow you to grade the quality of the studies that you are including in your systematic review. So just because a study is shit does not mean you should exclude. Excluding a study because it's poor quality is never a good reason, because you need to be able to say someone conducted a study even though they were shitty researchers. Sorry for the rude words. So here is an example, 2 small questions about a standardized tool for systematic review quality appraisal. Did the trial address a clearly focused issue? Was the assignment of patients to treatments randomized? Just what I mentioned before. And each answer will be associated with a number of points, which will grade the clinical trial. Okay, moving on. 7 minutes to conclude. I think we will just fit. We'll be a bit tight, but we'll manage. So here we have concluded the critical appraisal of every single study that we have included in the systematic review. Okay, and now we move on to the synthesis, and I'm going to address them all together: the analysis, the writing, and the publication. Okay, so now at this point in time, you are basically starting to prepare your report, right? And the objective here is to provide an overview of what is available on your research question, right? And usually you need to start with providing an overview of what is available. Start by building tables. At least that's it worked very well for me when I was learning to conduct systematic reviews. You must start by building tables, and you must ask yourself, what tables are relevant for me to express a message that I want to share? For example, you may want to include the geographical spread of the studies. You have a little table, studies conducted in the United States 5, conducting in Ecuador 1, and so on and so forth. And that way, you will have a little table that gives an overview of where the studies were conducted. Same thing for publication years, and so on and so forth. You can have many tables. It doesn't matter how many tables you are using, but make sure you are using tables that are relevant to the audience, people who want to answer the research question. Then, so these are overview tables, are not really analytical questions. Then you can work on analytical question where you include the relevant outcomes. And usually these tables are the cornerstone of your systematic review. Keep in mind, basically these tables are small extracts of your big extraction table. All the data is already there. You are just selecting what data is relevant to answer your question. But be careful here. When you are talking about analytical tables, make sure you're not comparing carrots and bananas. What I'm saying here is, I'm going to use a stupid example. If you have a table saying how many people died in the study, and you are saying 5, 10, 205, if you are not providing the exact context, for example, how many people were included in the study overall, then you are comparing carrots and bananas, okay? So be very careful here that you're not misleading the reader about what you are trying to say. I have sinned in that regard. I remember writing the first draft of my PhD, I had compared things that were not comparable, and I was smashed back by my supervisors, as it should be, until I learned that you cannot compare carrots and bananas. Okay. Before you start working on your report and your publication, I strongly encourage you to read many systematic reviews. The more you read, the more prepared you will be. And if you don't know where to find them, open the Cochrane library, because there are hundreds of systematic reviews that can be quite inspiring or scary, because they're usually really good and really large systematic reviews. Now, in terms of structure, let's go quickly covering the standard structure of a publication of a systematic literature review. As usually, it starts with an introduction. And typically, there are 4 parts of the introduction. I say typically because there are many writers who would disagree with that. But usually, I would start with the context. I would identify a knowledge gap, typically saying, no systematic review has been conducted in this particular area recently. Then you justify your study. That is, why do you want to know about this particular answer? What is your purpose? And then you state your objectives very clearly. This study aims to identify and analyze exhaustively the literature about pregnant women who are depressed and who have been treated with blah, 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 blah. Then you move on to the methodology. And here you explain your study protocol, so where you are planning to search, how you are planning to search. Typically, you need to explain what your search terms are, what databases you are planning on using, what eligibility criteria you are planning on using. Basically, the method section is what makes your study replicable. Third, you move on to the results. Here, I didn't put a lot of data, but actually it's the biggest part, the most relevant part. You need to start with the overview. What I mean by overview is here, when did you run your search? How many citations did you find at the beginning? Basically, what you need is to describe your Prisma diagram, and you need to include your Prisma diagram in this first part of the results. Then you move on to the general results, what I mentioned before, as in presenting the geographical spreads, the date of publications, and so on. I don't mention it here, it should be there, but afterwards, you can move on to the specific outcomes that are relevant to you and your research question. Typically, if it's about safety and efficacy, then you can move on to these particular outcomes. Once you are done with this, you can move on to the discussion, which typically has 3 steps. 1, a summary of the findings. 2, a contextualization, which means what do my findings mean in the broader context of literature? Usually you are going to make a lot of references to previously mentioned literature in the introduction. And then you discuss the limitations of your study, because no study is ever perfect. A small but nevertheless important part of a systematic literature review is that usually there are additional elements, additional material to the publication. If your systematic review includes a lot of studies, maybe more than 20, let's say, you will need a list of studies, title, authors, publication year, and usually it's quite nice to have one table in the additional elements. And then, people usually don't like to do it because it's a lot of work, but you need to share here your extraction sheet, your large table with all the data. Usually you need to break it down into smaller steps and smaller tables, but you must do that. Okay, now we are reaching to the point of publication. And I must warn you here, if you think that publishing a systematic review is easy, you're up for a surprise. It's not. It's easier than to publish regular literature reviews, but it's not an easy process. Nevertheless, and I find that in the last years, it has become significantly harder to publish systematic reviews. Nevertheless, there are some specialized journals that do like to publish those, and I very much appreciate publishing those. Again, go back to Cochrane. One thing that you must know is that before you start your systematic review, before you start actually the data extraction, you must absolutely submit and get a response from Prospero. Usually Prospero, there are other databases, but Prospero. It is an international perspective register of systematic reviews. What does it mean? They want you to submit your protocol before you do your search. Why am I saying it's important? Because many journals will not publish your systematic review if you didn't do this. And at that point, it's too late. If you're already done, it's too late, and every journal will reject your study. And that's a pain in the ass because you've worked so hard and now no journal wants to publish it. So be very careful about it. If you don't know what Prospero is, I strongly urge you to have a quick look online at what it means. Okay, now we are done with the publication. Ta-da! We are finished. Congratulations. I want to spend maybe 1 minute to go a bit beyond systematic reviews here. And I want to mention what you're seeing here on the image is a network. Maybe some of you have heard of network analysis before. It's basically how do we connect knowledge in the world? So here what you're seeing is an example. I don't remember which study that was, but how do researchers connect to each other? Okay. So for example, if you search in your systematic review, who were the authors and who were they working with? You could build this type of map. Typically, if you look at this guy here, we can't see his face, but what you can see is that he works or she works with a lot of people, but most of these people are not connected to the remaining group of network. So what it means is that this guy is probably a link to other fields. That's what it would suggest. But on the contrary, there are others that are very much inside the network and can collaborate with many others. It's quite interesting to conduct network analysis as part of a systematic review to understand how knowledge is created. Who creates knowledge? Now, why am I mentioning this? Is that increasingly in systematic reviews, we are expecting visual material to understand knowledge. And if you are willing to develop this type of network, you may think, how the hell do I build those? Well, I have a good news for you, especially if you belong to the USFQ for that matter, is that at ISIN, we have gotten to learn to use a specific network, and we will be able to help you build this type of network based on your extraction file. So if you want to build this type of network, get in touch with me, get in touch with the people of ISIN, and we will be able to help you build this type of network. Okay, this is where we end. 4 minutes past the time. That's not so bad. Here I put my contact details if you are looking to be in touch with me. I'm happy to answer your questions. Happy to be in touch with you. I have not mentioned mesh terms as I promised to Jorge, so I'm going to mention. You remember earlier we talked about TIAB, title and abstract, as to where do we search, right? But title and abstract is only one of the various ways to search inside a database. Okay, so let me put PubMed here. I'm trying to remember something here. I just can't quite remember right now. Let me give me just a second to share. Okay. You can see the screen, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Haven't killed you yet. Okay, let's say that I'm putting the word cancer here, but okay. As you can see here, you can search all fields, or you can search a number of elements here. Okay. So let's say that I don't want to search all field, but I want to search mesh. And I'm going to search the word cancer. I'm hoping it's going to work because I can't remember exactly how that works. And I'm clicking search here. So here I'm only searching cancer. Oh my God, I can't remember. Hold on. This is not right. Mesh terms. I'm going to try to explain how mesh terms work. Yeah, I see there are a couple of questions about this. Samantha, yes, I will send the PowerPoint. I have forgotten, but yes, I will send the PowerPoint. Okay, here it is. I think I'm in the right place. So here I'm searching search terms. Maybe, well, sorry, I didn't prepare that. Okay. A search term is a mesh term is a, no, I'm not explaining myself well. Sorry, hold on, I'm putting my mind together here. In PubMed, there are people who are working, okay? And these people, a lot of them are in charge of categorizing all studies that are included into Medline, all right? And they've created keywords, okay? So for example, if I publish a study about depression, most likely they have a keyword that is going to be depression. That when you click on that keyword, all studies that they have categorized as belonging to depression will appear. That's what they call mesh terms. So a mesh term is a keyword that is applied by the workers of PubMed and that is specific to PubMed. Okay, so they have a tree of words. So as you can see on the screen, there is a word neoplasm. Let's click on it. And yes, Cesar, I will do what you are asking me in a moment. But let's start with cancer. All right. So here you are seeing neoplasm as a starting point of the tree, because it's a quite big area. And you can see that this keyword is then broken down into various categories. So here you can see the full mesh categories. So here, disease categories, neoplasm, and then neoplasms are broken down into groups: cyst, hamartoma, neoplasm by histologic type, and so on. Actually, you can see there are quite a lot. So now let's try to look for a more specific one. I'm not sure if there is one or two N's suddenly. Apparently there are two. You can see my knowledge in the area is not amazing. All right, cannabis appears, and there are 1, 2, 3, there are 8 mesh terms that are related to cannabis, okay? And you need to choose which one you are interested in. So cannabis, the plant, then marijuana abuse, medical marijuana. Let's say that you are interested in medical marijuana. Let's click on it, and you will see the tree. So all mesh categories, chemicals and drugs categories, pharmaceutical preparation, medical marijuana. What you can do is go back to so that you understand how to use it. Hold on. Advanced. So now we go back to the search, and we're going to put medical marijuana between quotes, square brackets, mesh. Okay, now when you search this, you are going to find every single study that has marijuana, medical marijuana, as a mesh term. So let's click search here, and you will see that there are 1,336 results that are related to medical marijuana as a mesh term. But usually, because humans are imperfect, mesh terms are not quite complete. That's why you need to combine it. So let's say we say or medical marijuana, and I'm going to put TIAB here. So here you can see 1,336 results. If I click search again, in theory, it should be larger. All right, so it is significantly larger. It means there are many studies that are about medical marijuana that do not have medical marijuana as a mesh term. That's why you always need to combine them with TIAB and mesh. That's the standard. But what I recommend here is that you look at other systematic reviews related to your topic so that you understand more clearly how to build your search strategy. Okay, Jorge, does that seem satisfactory, my description of mesh terms?
Yes, Jonathan, thank you very much.
All right, great. Now, I would like to open the floor for questions. I'm happy to answer more specific questions, questions that are related to your own research if you want. We have a question by Pedro. Let's listen to you, Pedro.
Oh, hello, Jonathan. Congratulations for your excellent talk. I learned a lot. Thank you. And I would like to ask you, when you want to, for example, make a systematic review about the state of the art of a technology or a diagnostic tool, for example, how many years should I take to the back? What would be like a criteria for that?
That's an incredibly good question. And it's also a dangerous question. Why are you saying that? I'm pretty sure you are saying that because you have too many results and you're looking for a way to reduce how many citations you are finding. And usually, one attractive way is to reduce the dates. Let me go back to the slide where I was, with the page where I was just now. If you see here, there are publications about medical marijuana from 1978 to 2020. And actually, most publications are quite recent. But if you limit to the last 6 years, there are 300 citations less. So you may be tempted to say, well, let's search then a bit less. Let's look at the last 3 years. Look, 900 citations less. That's half of the work done already. But you need to ask yourself, does it bias my work? And here, the answer is you must absolutely have a perfect justification for excluding a particular space in time. And here, you must, for example, let's say that you are a diagnostic tool. No, I'm going to give you another example that I find I'm more aware of. Let's say that you are looking at the prevalence of breast cancer. And one thing that we know in the area of breast cancer is that one of the key sources of breast cancer was hormone replacement therapy, which became clear to be causing cancer at the turn of the century, if I'm not wrong. I think the biggest studies came out in 98, 99. So what you may be interested in is that you will look at the prevalence after the study came out. So there you could say, I'm only going to look studies from 1999 so that I look at the cancer prevalence after the study was published. Here you have a very good argumentation as to why. But if you're looking at clinical trials, and there is a clinical trial that says something that you don't like and was published in 1998, and you can casually put the date threshold 1999 just to make sure this clinical trial is not included, that's a horrible reason to put that date. And anyone who is quite clear on how to build search strategies will see it as clear as day. So you can put dates, same thing, you can put geographical limitations, but you better have a good reason for putting those. Does that answer your question, Pedro, to some extent? Maybe?
Yes, Jonathan, and I have another question, if I may.
Well, so far I see no other questions, so you may.
Okay, thank you. What would be the difference between a systematic review and a meta-analysis?
They are very tight together. They're not the same, they're quite different, but they are very close. In order to conduct a meta-analysis, you must conduct a systematic review. It's a subsequent step. A meta-analysis is a statistically monitored computation of the data. Let me rephrase in a different way. Let's say that you want to know the efficacy of the vaccine for the common cold. There is no vaccine for the common cold. Let me rephrase, vaccine for the seasonal flu, right? And you want to, hold on, let me try to, I'm getting lost into my question. Sorry, tell me again the question. I'm sorry, I'm getting lost. I'm going to answer next to the door. Tell me again, Pedro, what your question was.
No, I just asked you, what would be the difference between meta-analysis and systematic review?
Yes, sorry, the day has been long and I lose track of where I was.
I don't understand you.
If you want to have the proper answer of the efficacy of that vaccine, you need to conduct a meta-analysis where you are going to be able to combine the various results of the various clinical trials, right? And a meta-analysis allows you to proceed with that. But in a systematic review, you are not allowed to combine data, okay? If you want to start combining data, you need to conduct a meta-analysis, okay? And it requires quite thorough statistical knowledge because otherwise you are going to add up tomatoes and carrots, as I was mentioning before. Does that help, Pedro?
Yes, Jonathan, thank you, great.
All right.
Thanks.
You're welcome, Pedro. Do we have Chinese information? So Cesar, you are asking quite a key question here. You're not seeing the question. He's writing this privately on the chat. The issue of language is one big topic because, and I don't want to enter the controversy here, but most research is published in English. Does it mean that all research is conducted in English? No, that's not true. And actually China is among the big producers of research. And there was a debate recently within the COVID world that there were some people who spent months trying to understand a particular question after a systematic review because they identified a knowledge gap, but they had not included Chinese or the various Chinese languages as part of their systematic review. And there was a publication published in Chinese that answered that question months before, and it would have saved them months of research. So the more and more we need to be very careful of what we search and what language we're including. If you're looking for a type of information in Latin America and you are only searching publications in English, I'm sorry to say, but that you are probably omitting a great number of information. Be very careful about justifying why you are only searching English. And just because you don't speak the language, it is a shitty reason for not including other languages. So you may want to look for databases in Spanish, for example, in Chinese. But how do you deal with Chinese? Because it's quite a challenging language. I don't have an answer for this. What maybe I could tell you is that the world is filled with internet users and a lot of people are quite collaborative. So if you get in touch with a researcher in China, they might be able to help you, guide you to the process of searching the Chinese literature, but you will need collaborators. Another good reason why conducting a systematic review alone on your own may not necessarily be the best approach to identify exhaustively the literature. I hope, Cesar, that I'm providing you with a thorough answer. We have another question by Diana.
Hi, Jonathan. Thank you so much for your amazing presentation. My internet failed when you were talking about hand search, and I was wondering if you could please repeat that part briefly.
Yes.
Thank
So
you.
what the principle of hand searches is that hand searches, we must assume that our searches of databases are incomplete. Why? Because there are always some publications that are not included in the database. There are always some children who are looking for that are outside the forest, to be saying it like this. And sometimes we know in some specific areas where it's likely that we might find some. For example, if you are looking for, I'm going to say, for pregnant women with depression, there might be in the world patient associations that produces their own research that maybe is produced through a report, not a peer-reviewed publication, and would be only available on their website. So what you might want to do is prepare a list of places that you want to search manually, that's why it's called hand searches, that you want to search manually so that you complete your search a little bit. Basically, that's what hand searches are about. And it's quite important to be quite thorough on this part.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome, Dima. Do we have more questions, or have I killed you all now that it's almost 9 p.m. on a Friday night before a feriado? Do we have additional questions?
Yes, I do, Jonathan.
Alpa has a question, and also I think I thought I saw Kevin has a question afterwards. Don't forget to raise your hand, your blue hand, so that I can see who is with a question. Alpa, we are listening to you.
Thank you for the talk. This is more like a technical question. So how do you eliminate duplicates on Zotero?
I was hoping someone would not ask that question. The reason why, and I speak of experience because recently we were stuck with this, is that the tool to remove duplicates as part of Zotero is not great. It doesn't allow you to do automatic deduplication. You need to go through one by one. But what you can do is, I can open Zotero for you. I hope it will open quickly so that I can show you. But basically there is an option, I think in edit somewhere, identify duplicates. But you need to look for them one by one. So that it's taking forever to open because I have a very large database on my Zotero. I think what you need to do is select all the citations that you are relevant in your database and click tools. I think it might be called tools. I can't click anywhere. And then here, identify duplicates. And then you need to check them one by one, but it's a tedious process. The best place to remove duplicates easily is EndNote. But EndNote is not cheap to buy. However, there is a free version for a few weeks. So if you are well prepared, technically speaking, what you can do is download EndNote for a while, remove the duplicates, transfer your database to Zotero, and continue your work from there. But beware here, and I say beware of experience. These guys who own Zotero and who own EndNote are not friends. And somehow I think they are looking for ways to make our lives complicated to transfer databases from one to the next. So it is just not easy. If there is one or two of you that are interested, I found a way with the group we're working on systematic reviews at the moment to transfer from EndNote to Zotero, but it was quite a headache. So if you want, get in touch with me personally, I'll be happy to provide you with those answers.
Thank you, Jonathan.
You're welcome, Alpa. Kevin, you're up.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan, for the talk. I was just wondering, what are the study arms? You mentioned them when analyzing the data. There, you mentioned that it's different randomized control trials had these study arms. Are those outcomes of the research, or
what do you mean by study arms?
Study arms.
Oh, arms. Okay. So, okay, I ask again your question because I didn't get that.
So I was wondering, what exactly are they, and why are they relevant to have them on our Excel?
If you are conducting a systematic review for a meta-analysis, you need to have every single piece of data separate. And that's why you need to have data by arms. But if your goal is not to conduct a meta-analysis, then you don't necessarily need to separate them by arms. Is it enough, my answer, or not?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Do we have more questions? I'm still happy to stay online if you have more particular questions. It looks like I've used all the energy you had left in yourselves. Keep in mind that here are my contact details. I will answer your questions happily. You may need to insist with me a little bit because I don't always respond very quickly, but I will be happy to answer. And if you are USFQ community, get in touch with the scene. I'll be happy to also collaborate with IM to make our new system work. All right, then I wish you all a pleasant evening. I wish you all a pleasant weekend, and good luck with your systematic literature reviews. Goodbye and good luck.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank
you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, guys.
Nice weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being there.
Dankeschön.
I'm going to stay online for those who may have some additional questions. All right, it doesn't sound like there is any further questions. I'm going to close the session for now. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.